Okay, welcome everybody to this PhD defense. My name is Torben Linger, and I have the privilege to try to guide you through this afternoon where we're going through Krestine's PhD defense. I will welcome our PhD committee of the examiners, which we have sitting here, Professor Anna Ørvad Brøndbæk from Luleå, Anja Meyer here from our Technical University, and Mario Storka from the University of Zagreb. Welcome to you. And the examiners, the supervisors, also welcome to you. Tim McAloon and Tom Hart, which unfortunately has become sick. Today we're going to listen to what you're going to tell us, and the rule says that I'm supposed to say the name of your presentation and the name of the thesis, but that is easy because they are the same, and it is, as it says here on the screen, a framework for conceptualization of PSS solutions on network-based development models. This is all conducted at the department where both I and Tim McAloon comes from, the Department of Mechanical Engineering, where we're sitting in the section of Engineering Design and Product Development, where you also have spent the last years. What you are going to see today is we have in total close to 3 hours here. First, we will have the lecture with 45 minutes where you are going to present. There will be a 10-minute break, so you can go out and stretch your legs, and then we will have the questioning from the examining committee. When you are finished with your questioning, the supervisors can ask questions, and if anyone else in the audience would like to pose a question, you're welcome to do so. But the rule states that you are supposed to tell me now if you want to put a question. So therefore, the question is, do anyone like to put questions to Krestine afterwards? That doesn't seem to be the case. So, after the plan is that after you have asked your different questions, the time plan is that we have this 45-minute plus 10 minutes break. Then we have the questioning, and we would like to finish here around 3:30. So there's time for you to do a little preparation on what you've heard, and then from thereafter there will be a reception outside this door. So these were the practical remarks. So now we look forward to what you have to tell us. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. And good afternoon, everyone. I've been looking very much forward to present my research project today. And as Torben said, the title of my project is a framework for conceptualization of product service systems solutions, with the subtitle of on network-based development models. So I've been focusing on the field of product service systems, and then with a particular focus on the network perspectives of a PSS. So before I continue, I would like to give you a little overview of what I'm going to present today, a little peek into the different elements. And first I will give you some examples of what is a product service system. And then I will introduce the industrial research foundation of my project. And then I will present the actual research design that I used, and then stage by stage present the research activities that I had, and then summarizing with the contributions. But first of all, I would like you to imagine how the world looked like 7 years ago. So maybe at a regular Saturday you were going home from the city and you were looking for a cab, but all the cabs, they kept passing you and you couldn't get one. But that is not the issue anymore, because now we have the possibility to use the services from Uber. So you take your mobile phone and you select the driver that you prefer, and the driver does not have any issues finding you because the GPS location on your phone. Maybe 7 years ago you wanted to listen to a new music album, and you needed to go down to the nearest music shop, and all they had were local music. and you did not want local music. That is also different now. Now you can go online using the services of Spotify and choose whatever album you like to listen to. You can also listen to music that your friends listen to, or listen to the trending music in Mexico. Also, a lot of you might have experienced this, so going on a vacation and selecting a hotel room to stay at, and you were very disappointed when you came because what you found was this. And what you actually really wanted was something like this, a very cozy atmosphere while staying abroad. And this is now possible because Airbnb provides this online platform where private homeowners can rent out their apartment. Another example, which you've experienced on your last flight trip, is the business case of Rolls-Royce. So you might not have been aware of it. And this industry has also been transitioning a lot in the last few years. So Rolls-Royce, they changed their business model. So instead of just focusing on the product, they start offering power-by-the-hour solution. So they took over the responsibility of the operation of the engine. And this was a huge change because now they also needed to take care of a large network of service technicians, like the guy on the wing here. And he needed the right capabilities to service the engine. And also Rolls-Royce developed very sophisticated monitoring equipment to be able to forecast when to do the services. So what we just saw is some examples of companies that changed their business strategy to not focus on the product, but focus on the performance. And it's all of the companies, they facilitate co-creation among a lot of different stakeholders. The last example is the example of the maritime industry, which has been the research foundation of my project. And this industry has also been changing a lot in the last years. So what you see here is a large container ship, more than 300 meters long, and more than 2,000 suppliers are providing services and product for the ship. And maybe a scenario for the ship could be that the engine is maybe operated or monitored at a remote location. And the service technicians on board the ship might have had training that the suppliers offered. And the cranes on deck, they will maybe be serviced when they hit the harbor. So my point is that a lot of the products and services on the ship is tied to a unique service agreement. And this change, this transition, the Danish maritime suppliers experienced very heavily when the Danish shipyard at Lindø closed down, because that meant that a lifelong order book also disappeared. So now they could not sell their products directly to at least the Danish shipyards. Now they needed to look at the ship owner. So that's a big step. So they needed to look at this, the ship in operation, and a new customer, the ship owner. And a ship is a very complex, large technical system. And offering services and aftermarket services for this requires collaboration between many of the suppliers. And this is an example of such a system. It's a retrofit solution, and it was offered by two of the suppliers collaborating to develop this. It's a scrubber system, and it cleans the exhaust gas from the propulsion system on board the ship. And here we see at the top Alfa Laval offering heat boilers and heater system, and then a very detailed or new integration with the engine. And besides these two companies, also the Industrial Research Foundation of the project included 8 other suppliers. So in total we had 10 suppliers connected to the project. And they were offering a lot of different products, so electrical installations and cabling and tank management systems and also cranes and a lot of different product areas we had in focus. So one of the first things I did while investigating the industry was to look at, so if they needed to, if they needed to change, not just not to focus on the shipyard, but focus on the ship owner, they needed to be present globally. So by charting the 10 most busiest ports worldwide, based on the cargo volume, we could see that 9 out of 10 of the most busiest ports were in Asia, so in China and Japan. And then charting the presence of the suppliers that I just illustrated, then dividing it in sales offices and service stations, we could see that 25% of the suppliers in the project had service stations located in Asia. And then more than that half of their service stations were located in Europe, where only one of the most busiest ports were. So that was a little insight into the industrial foundation. Now I would like to detail a little bit the theoretical understanding of the PSS, of a PSS. And first of all, a PSS can be seen as a potential benefit. So a way for the companies to optimize their systems and bring a better performance on the market. And the PSS can also be seen as an augmented product development strategy. So new ways to conduct product development, designing the product so it's possible to service it in the whole of its lifetime. And another way to see PSS is as a strategy, which has been very important for my project, because the companies, they need new ways to organize themselves in the network to be able to develop and also maintain the system. And then the last way to look at a PSS can be as mental mindset. It requires a whole new way of thinking, which we can support by developing design tools for the PSS developer to use. As I've been mentioning a few times, this transition needs the new relationships in the network, and we're moving towards a multiple stakeholder approach. And I would just like to read out this quote. The organizational change includes intra-organizational and inter-organizational change, shifting the view on value creation from a sequential value chain towards a so-called value system, where value creation crosses both time and place and then appears in new stakeholder relationships. So first of all, I would like to point towards the intra-organizational. So the change means that the companies need new collaboration between the departments. So now service technicians need to collaborate with the R&D department and also closely collaborate with the management level, because it requires a whole new business strategy. And also the inter-organizational change, they need new relationships with the customer to assure an information flow, but also with the suppliers and suppliers, so all the relations externally to the company. And then also here, important is to see is the value creation. So this change from a sequential chain where value is added from one supplier to the next, and in this way increasing the value. Now moving towards product service systems requires a network of stakeholders, where things can be delivered across time and stakeholders in many iterations. And Sahai had this very nice quote. It is not the competition between single companies that defines today's market, but systems against systems that defines the business landscape. So in my research project, the literature foundation can be illustrated like this in 3 different areas. And of course, I focused a lot on product service systems with concepts like integrated solutions and product life thinking and so on. But then I also looked very much into theories from network management and inter-organizational relationships. And then the third area here is that I also focused on innovation management, and so business strategies and innovation strategies. And then one of the focuses were to combine these areas and investigate if we could find concepts or tools that we could bring to use in the PSS area. And in this way, develop a new theoretical foundation for network-based PSS development. So as any other research project, I also had some research goals, and they go like this. So first of all, one of the aims were to support the suppliers in this transition by supporting them in developing new and better integrated products and services. And then an empirical generic goal were to look at the industry network and then identify and support new collaborations between the suppliers or to build new solutions. And the third goal were a theoretical oriented one where, as I mentioned before, so combining new theoretical areas. My research project has been part of a large innovation consortium called Proteus, and it's an acronym for Product Service System Tools to Ensure User-Oriented Services. And the project were organized in 5 different work packages, where my main contribution were towards network-based development models. But then also very much I contributed to analyze the industry and to assess how ready they were to approach this new strategy. And then the 5th package, so developing new tools, normative tools that the industry practitioners could use. And for the whole consortium, this was based on the 10 suppliers that I mentioned earlier, which has also been the case for me. In the research approach, I used the framework by Blessing and Chakrabarty, so design research methodology. And this supports a systematic way of conducting design research, aiming at either improving the actual design process or improving the actual product. And it has different stages like this. So if we look in the middle here, they suggest to take a deep dive into the industry and observe it, and then identify if you can influence it in some way. And then a prescriptive study could be to develop tools that could improve the industry, and then a way to do it is to implement these tools and then see what change it has in industry. And the research questions, 3 of these, I would like to read them out loud. So the first one was, through what terms and models can PSS offerings be described in order to support their successful synthesis? And research question 2 is like this. How can a PSS conceptualization activity take advantage of a PSS offering typology in the creation of PSS solutions? And the third question, how can a PSS conceptualization activity allow an inherent network approach for co-development of PSS solutions? So bringing these 2 together, this is the research design of my project. At the top we can see the different research stages, and at the bottom we see the different research questions. So the first stage of my research, I dived into the industry and described and observing characteristics and so on, answering research question 1. And at the last part of the first descriptive study, I developed a tool answering research question 2. And this part involved all the 10 suppliers from the project. And in the prescriptive study here in the middle, I developed a new tool to focus on the network of a PSS, which I then tested in a second descriptive study where I involved 2 suppliers out of the 10 companies. So now I would like to take you through each of the design stages. And the first one was the explorative study. And as I said before, it was taking a deep dive and being able to characterize the industry and also describe trends and so on. And this also gave me a very detailed insight into each of the 10 case companies. And it was done by a semi-structured interview approach and then analyzed by using a pattern matching strategy. And the empirical findings from this stage were compiled into a report which the industry received. But another important result from this stage was that we were able to establish a platform to match expectations between the companies that were part of the project and then also the researchers. So we could have 3 more years of good collaboration. So the second part of the descriptive study was focused at developing the typology. And the aim were to reveal their current level, so what kind of services were they already offering. And this was done in a different approach, so we developed a typology which we brought to the companies, and then they described their offerings based on this typology. And then after each time we went to the companies, I triangulated the data between the companies, and then I adjusted the typology after this. And looking at what existing service typologies were present in literature, a lot of these, in general, scholars mentioned that there was a lack of understanding of what could a service actually be in PSS. And also the examples of different ways of describing services were lacking consolidation. And then in general, the PSS terminology needs to be strengthened. And to get a better way of describing which offerings were in the company is very important, because a PSS is developed across departments and also maintained involving a lot of stakeholders. So it's important to have a good language there. And then also bringing in this typology can improve the development of services and also improve the operating of these. And then just detailing a little bit, so how did they look like, these typologies? Some of the scholars used the transitioning, the continuum, so from offering services focused at the product or offering services focused at the customer's business. And then Tucker did this by developing archetypical product service systems. Others used just lists of services, diagrams, or morphologies. And another interesting one is that services were often described by what capabilities are needed to be able to offer these. And another one were collaboration and how so describing the services. Scholars used the network and the changed relations to describe these. So an example was was a transactional or relational service, and Oliver and Kallenberg used the 2 different, so business process integration or technical application integration. So were you integrating with the customer's business, or did you improve the product that you offered to the customer? So to continue developing this generic industry typology, I took point of departure in an existing framework, which was the one of TANS. And this one uses a set of service strategies, where the first strategy focuses on the use, the product itself and the use of it. So offering maintenance or repair activities. And another service strategy is product life services, where you don't look at the use phase, but you look at different phases of the product life, so disposal or installation. And the third strategy is not looking at the product, but looking at the user who is using the product, and then support the user by training or maybe in supporting the operating of the system. And the last category is business supporting services. So here the suppliers can offer to take some responsibility of the customer's business, offering financing services or maybe outsource parts of the business to the suppliers. So all these visits at the companies and the literature study resulted in this. This is a list of 48 services we found. You don't need to be able to read them. They're categorized based on the framework by TAN. What we could see was that most of the services were within the product use service. So still, the suppliers were focusing on the product. So just summarizing what this was actually about, the development of a PSS offering typology within a unique empirical context. So that was a language we could use to describe the industry. But at the end of the descriptive study, what I wanted to do was to make this typology in a different format so the industry practitioner could use it. So therefore, the rest of the research takes point of departure in this framework, which is a PSS conceptualization framework. And this is the design object when focusing on PSS. So now you don't design the product, you design the ecosystem and the value proposition. You design for these 4 different dimensions of a PSS, where my focus is on the ecosystem and the typology is very much focused on the offering lifecycle. And then each circle on this framework is different development stages. So it follows a regular product development phases, from analyze to define and conceptualize, and then evaluate what you've developed. The first thing I did with the list of services were to develop a graphic visualization of the service. So what you see here was one of the larger contributions, and the blue represent the list I just presented, all the offerings. And then also we mapped the channels and the mix of products and service in yellow here. But taking one step further to develop an actual tool that can be used while conceptualizing, I put up a guiding statement. And this was to make sure that the tool could include more than one of the PSS domains, and also make sure that it could iterate between development stages. And then also that it could make use of a variety of different design tools to open up the solution space. And before I started also, I went into the literature of information visualization and made another guiding statement. So in conceptualization, using boundary objects strengthen the dialogue between multiple stakeholders. And this is important in PSS because a lot of the solutions needs to be captured when they're still abstract. So this made me develop this theoretically construct, so a PSS concept element. So that's small fragments of a whole PSS concept. So maybe some of you are familiar with these. It's the IDEO methods cards, and they bring different methods for the designer to use, so they get inspired to use new tools. A method could be a scenario or body storming. And with inspiration in this and using all the services listed before, and using the categories of TAN, we developed this the service PSS service cards. And also at the very end of the descriptive study, we continued exploiting the typology we found and developed this PSS configurator. It's an online software tool which support the PSS developer in a systematic way to develop PSS packages. And this was done by mapping the affinity between each of the services that we found, and in this way guiding a selection of these. So that was the first and second part of the descriptive study. The next part is the prescriptive study, where I focused at developing a tool for supporting PSS ecosystem conceptualization. But before continuing, I would like to detail, so what is actually the PSS ecosystem? The ecosystem is comprised by many different stakeholders and their interaction and relations. And within the ecosystem, the PSS occurs and is also developed and maintained. And if we look at a few descriptions of what a PSS is, we look at Mancini. He says that a PSS is a long-term business strategy based on value co-production amongst partners. And another description of PSS from Madsen, he describes PSS can be seen as a partnership-based business model approach. So very much the ecosystem is used to describe what is actually a product service system. And going to the tool, so the aim of developing the tool here was to support this inherent network approach and make it possible to facilitate co-development between multiple stakeholders. And also here, I developed a guiding statement. So here it was important to make sure that a lot of different stakeholders could take part and collaborate, and do this in a way that as many as possible perspectives of the ecosystems could be uncovered, and then make it possible to use these while developing the PSS solution. So the tool is called a PEC tool, and PEC stands for Product Service Ecosystem Characteristics. So this tool consists of a set of 6 different characteristics and a set of use scenarios. And what does it do? It guides the facilitation of assessing the value system, and it supports identification of new constellations. And then it brings a shared language, the characteristics, to use while conducting the conceptualization. And then I would like to present the characteristics. So the first one, when looking into a lot of different literature, is of course who's taking part of the network. What resources and capabilities do they have? Is it across different product life phases, or is it across different industries? And another characteristic that I found was the relationship intensity. So how is the relationship? Is it a transactional or relational relationship? Do they collaborate in a strategic partnership, or do they just coordinate some information sharing or activities? And the third characteristic was the goal of the relationship. So was it to be first mover within a new technology, or was it to focus on developing a better process? So why have the relationship? And then value creation is about the what. So what is the outcome, and what is the focus? Different value proposition as maybe the performance of the system, or maybe an actual product. And then the relation exists in a point in time. It has a length. So it is when does the relation appear. And the last one is where. So is it with distant to the customer, or is the customer taking part of this network or relationship? So that was the characteristics, and this is a scenario for how they could be used. So it details that using a regular stakeholder mapping could be a possibility, and then sequence a scenario, for example, the take-back system, identify a link that could be improved, and then use the characteristics to identify how to improve it. Could it appear in another time? So could it be another customer activity to take point of departure in, and so on? Yeah. And then 4 different scenarios. I developed 4 different scenarios, and they're plotted here on the framework. And they're located in different development phases of the PSS. And also here I charted the tools from the descriptive study, so the PSS cards and the PSS configurator. So now I would like to present how I evaluated the support tool. And this I did based on a comparative case study, which was a workshop base, and I involved, or I only changed one thing, which was who I involved in the workshops. And I transcribed all the material, so all the conversations at the workshops. And then I used the method of analytical generalization to evaluate, to use for analyzing. And this was set up by, first of all, I conducted a large initial analysis, so identifying which stakeholders could collaborate, and then using the PEG tool to design a new way for them to work. And I was guided by the PSS conceptualization framework. And to be able to set up the workshop, I also had a lot of interviews at the companies involving more than 20 interviewees. And that was to be able to gather information to make the information models that are brought to the workshops. And then the setup were based on 3 workshops. So the workshop A and B is a workshop at each of the companies where they collaborate between different departments. And then workshop C, I bring the 2 stakeholders together. And just to summarize, then the element of the workshops were using the framework, conceptualization framework, a unique set of activities, collaborators were there, and then a set of PSS tools, and then the representation models, and then I facilitated the 3 workshops. And to be able to do the evaluation, I set up 5 different measures. And I won't go into detail with these, don't worry. But the first one is PSS efficacy, which deals with, at the workshops, what kind of concepts were developed. Were they network-oriented, and how did they exploit the network perspectives that the stakeholders got? And then to make sure that it didn't have a negative effect on, for example, the number of offerings or how service-oriented they were, and to make sure that they were actually feasible. These 4 other measures were included. This is a picture from one of the workshops at the PrimeServe Frederikshavn. And this is one of the groups, and we have a service analyst there, manager of after sales, and the service project manager, and then an excellent co-facilitator at the end of the table. And on the table, there were the value network, and also the offer portfolio, so an early version of the offering typology from the first study. And then supporting visuals with the customer activity cycles on the walls. And this is how the workshop looks like in the framework. So here the different activities are charted. And just want to point out 2 things. So the first one is the workshop started with point of departure in the value proposition, which went like this. We offer a total lifecycle management of your ship's performance, securing a maximum operation hours and minimizing your total lifecycle cost. That was the point of departure. And then different activities appears, and up in the ecosystem, that is when they start to conceptualize. And then the different tools are mapped by the letters. And this is how the stakeholder network looked like. So I did a literature study of which mapping methods existed already, and then I integrated a few elements of these. But just to point out, one of the important things were that I chose the resolution of the suppliers at a level where they could see the departments internally in the companies. And this is another group working with the network as an activity. And this is an example of what was developed. So these are examples of a PSS concept element. So and it's the material that I transcribed, so it's all quotes. So I can maybe read out loud one of them. Condition monitoring of everything, that would be a good thing to have as a future offering, where also the customer could access the data, and this could be done through different access levels. So this is an example of how they are integrating the customers in a different relation and also including price levels, so they're talking about different access levels. And another really great example is this one, where the quote is this. I definitely see things we could do together, particularly on innovation. Here we have shared interests. How can we find synergies by marketing each other's products, for example, Tier 2 and Tier 3? It might be that we could find energy optimization possibilities for your boiler system. I also know that man can find reductions on propeller and maybe the S-star solution. I can't remember what the S-star solution is, but for sure what they're talking about here is a new offering where they focus on energy optimization. And so the actual analysis, I will just show you a few examples of this. And then the method of analytical generalization, it is not a quantitative way of doing it, but it supports a very systematic way of analyzing what happened at the workshops. So the sample size doesn't really matter. But in total, there were 128 different concept elements. And this pie chart here illustrates that 97 of these were offerings. And 16% were developed at the workshop with Man Primesø Frederikshavn. 39% were developed at Alfa Laval Aalborg. And then 45% of the total of 97 of the offerings were developed at the second workshop, where I brought the two stakeholders together. And this is one of the results from the analysis. Just very briefly, here we see the different workshops and the percentage of, first of all, it illustrates the PSS concept elements and how they're placed on the service continuum. So is it focusing on the use or on the business of the customer? And then I compared workshop C against the average of A and B. So this was really what I was interested in. How did it look compared to the first two workshops? And then here there's the actual number of the concept elements. And then this is interesting because here most of the offerings developed were focusing on the activities of the customer, so supporting the customer using the product better. Another example is mapping which stakeholders they mentioned in the different concepts. So this is a very nice result because it illustrates that they focus very much on the supplier. And another result were that of all the PSS concept elements, workshop C generated a lot of different concepts where new relations were suggested in back office. So not relations that the customer could see, but new collaborations in back office. So just a very short summary of this. The evaluation then indicated that the support had a positive influence on the efficacy. There were an increase in the back office relations. And then there were an increased focus on the network and infrastructure. So then I would like to summarize the contributions based on which research question I answered. And then the first contribution is, of course, the PSS offering typology. And then the whole charting of the industry. And also the systematically analysis of the whole branch as a whole. And then answering research question 2 were the typology. And then research question 3 were with the PSS PEG tool. And then for research question 3 also just the characteristics, the 6 ecosystem characteristics. And then these were tested in an empirically large case study. Both tested an existing framework and the tool I developed. And then the new notion of a PSS concept element. So just at the very end some suggestions for future research. Based on the research that I've made, it could be very interesting to develop further the typology, because the maritime industry did not contain any best practice as examples from as Rolls-Royce. And also further testing of some of the tools, and then also improvement of the actual characteristics. And then the characteristics can be developed into a reference model, so as a way to develop new tools that focus on the ecosystem. And just in general, I would suggest to keep focusing on a multi-stakeholder approach for co-development in PSS. And then more tools. The PEG tool will not do it. And also focus on the development strategies, maybe with the aim of the ecosystem as a specific strategy. And then continue also focusing on the mindset that is needed, because this is a really important thing. So just to summarize, I've developed a different set of tools and did some case studies which indicate that bringing the stakeholders together in new ways can actually bring some unforeseen and different solutions to integrate in a PSS system. I think that was it. So thank you very much. Thank you.